I'd like to ask a question this morning as we get started. Um, to hate or not to hate? I know anyone who's parented before has probably tried to get their kids to stop saying they hate things, right? It sounds very ugly coming out of a child's mouth. I hate this, I hate that. And so oftentimes those are very trivial things where it does need to be addressed. You need to talk about it. And sometimes where we talk about it in their terms, and we just need to stop using that word. We've got to stop using that word. But the Bible uses that word. And there's some interesting ways that the Bible speaks about hate that I would like us to think about this morning. There are things that need to be hated. There are things that need to be hated. And I think it will be profitable. I hope it will be for us to go through and think about that. I know one of the things that will come up, and I think this is probably the reason this thought got in my mind, is the word that you hear bounced around, the term, well, you're a hater. You're just being a hater. And in certain contexts, it's just conversation, not a big deal. But sometimes that is applied to people who are just trying to speak the truth. You're just trying to speak the truth, and because you're speaking the truth, it gets framed as being hateful. You get labeled a hater because you are trying to speak the truth. And I know we've made this point before, and I hope this lesson in no way undoes the reality that we need to learn how to speak the truth in love. We've got to learn how to speak the truth in love. If we're speaking the truth in hate, if we're speaking the truth out of hate, well, that's no good. We're not going to help them. We're not going to help anyone. But the reality is that just speaking the truth does not mean that you're being hateful. And I think that will be profitable for us to get in our minds and know how to defend ourselves or someone else that's getting mislabeled with that term. It was helpful to me to go to Vines and see the fact that hate, as far as the Bible's usage of the word hate, is primarily used three different ways. So I'm going to leave that up on the board. I'm going to keep that color coding as we go through. It helps me to be able to see things that way. But you have the first way, which is the way we usually think about it, the way when we're talking to our kids. Don't say hate. It's a malicious, it's an unjustifiable feeling. You despise this thing and you have no legitimate reason for despising this thing. You just hate it. And we use that, far too frequently, and we feel that far too frequently. It's something that needs to be addressed, that we should not have that feeling. We also see the Bible using it in the blue there as a relative preference of one thing over the other. And this is a point that we're not going to belabor too much today, but I do want to make it. There's a sense, we'll get into it in a second, but where God is said to hate Esau. And in reality, all he's really saying that he preferred Jacob over Esau. That's what's being described there. So that's the usage of that. And then the green is a feeling of aversion toward evil and error. A feeling of aversion, hatred toward something that is wrong. And as we get into that one, I think we all understand, but that's appropriate. There are times where it is appropriate to feel that feeling. Just as a kind of a blanket starting point here, Ecclesiastes 3 and verse 8, where you see the list of a time for this and a time for that. There's a time for everything under heaven. And in that list are things worth thinking about: a time to kill, a time to break down, a time to mourn, a time to throw stones, a time to tear, a time to keep silent. These are all interesting things to realize, that there is a time for war, he even says. And in that list toward the end, he says there's a time to hate. All of those things that I just listed have a positive thing on the other side of it, obviously, but these are all negative things, and they're a time to hate. The Bible is telling us there is a time for that. There's a time, and realizing that so much, again, when we're talking to our children, small children, we have to simplify things, and we end up speaking in absolutes and black and whiting everything. The reality is there's a time for everything under heaven. There is a time for everything under heaven. There's not a simple answer to hardly anything. We have to learn to apply wisdom and to know in this text, in this context rather, when it is appropriate to hate and when it is not appropriate to hate. We need to think through that. So that will be part of the design of this lesson. So as I said, I want us to first think about Jehovah, think about God. This word is applied to him. And so I feel like that's a great starting place to think about, okay, if we are told that God hates certain things, I want to understand that. I want to understand, well, what does he hate? Because if he hates something, it can't be wrong. It can't be bad. And I've already alluded to this, and as I said, we're not going to belabor this, but you can see his hatred toward Esau presented in Malachi and then referenced again in Romans 9. And I will say, if you go through and you read Romans 9, he's making a point there that Jacob and Esau, it was prophesied before their birth, before they'd ever done anything, good or bad, that God was going to love Jacob and hate Esau. And he's using that in the context to describe that God can show mercy to whomever he wants to. He can condemn whoever he wants to. It's his business. But some people read that chapter and they think, okay, well, this is terrible. This means that before I was born, before these guys were born, God decided, well, I'm just arbitrarily going to hate one and I'm arbitrarily going to love the other. Please understand as you read that chapter that that's not what he's teaching. He's not teaching that. We know from other places Esau is described as a profane man. He was a profane man. God's judgment fell upon him because of his profanity, because he was an unholy man. That's why the judgment happened. But in that text, in that chapter, he's making the point that God knew that. He knew beforehand what kind of men they were going to be. And he said beforehand how he was going to deal with them. I'm going to love Jacob and I'm going to hate Esau because of the profanity of Esau. That's how I understand that. So just be aware when you go to Romans 9, there is some difficult passages there to understand. But regardless, the point for this lesson is he preferred Jacob over Esau. He preferred him, and that's how the word is used. And we're gonna come back to that when we're talking about, okay, well, how does that apply to me? Like, what do I need to think about as far as that usage of the word? So again, still thinking about Jehovah, we so often, and rightfully so, point out and understand that God is a God of love. He is a God of love. You know, he expresses that in so many ways. We see that in 1 John 4 and verse 8 and a myriad of other passages. Even if the word love is not used, we see God showing his love. We see this in his character. The New Testament really goes to great lengths to point it out, but also the Old Testament. But with that, with the fact that he is a God of love, sometimes people will say, you know, how could a loving God send anyone to hell? How could a loving God condemn this lifestyle or condemn this sin? How could a loving God, people will even say, I cannot believe in a God who would do that, which is, it's such a shallow, infantile way of thinking. Like, God is what he is. You know, whether you want to get on board with it or not, whether you think you can believe in that God or not, doesn't change reality, doesn't change truth. The truth is the Bible describes God as a God of love, but it also speaks about him hating things. He also hates things. I'd like you to turn with me to Proverbs, if you would, Proverbs 6, and just read this with me. And this is something we could spend all morning on, you know, going to different verses where whether the word is used or not, we can see clearly that God dislikes certain things, that he has displeasure in certain things. But right here in this text, Proverbs 6, picking up in verse 16, says there are 6 things that the Lord hates, 7 that are an abomination to him. So you can connect those thoughts. Anywhere the Bible uses the idea of abomination, this is an abomination to the Lord, you can connect hate. You could, even if that word's not used there, this means, if it's an abomination, it means he hates it. 6 things he hates, 7 are abomination: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that make haste to run to evil, a false witness who breathes out lies, and the one who sows discord among brethren. So I just go to this passage just to plant this firmly in our minds. God hates sin. He hates sin. And we could spend all morning, as I say, going to passages that make this point. There's a few I just referenced in my notes, but Isaiah 61:8 describes the fact that he hates idolatry. Jeremiah 44, 2-5 describe several abominations that he hates. You could go almost anywhere in the Old Testament and start making this point, build this argument that there are things that God hates. These sins are things that he hates. And as you get in, and it'd be a whole nother lesson, I guess, to go in and study each one of these and think about what it is that he hates about them. I think just reading that, most of those feel, almost self-explanatory. The one that stands out to me is the one who sows discord among brothers. That's going to stand out as we get into thinking about how it applies to us, how these thoughts should apply to us. God hates it when brethren can't get along. He hates it when people are stirring up things among brethren. He hates that. These are things that he hates. Among other things, God hates sin. It's just so important to have that as a grounding. And so, obviously, coming now to the other side, and what I want to do with the rest of our time together is think about the reality. What I think the scriptures present over and over again is that we need to learn to see things the way God sees things. We need to learn to view things the way God views things. And if God hates something, I need to learn how to hate it. I need to learn how to despise it the way he despises it. And for yourself, think about specifically your own temptations, your own the sins that you struggle with. Don't think about the sins you don't struggle with. That we tend to do that. You say, those people, they struggle with this and that. Ha ha ha. How can they not get a handle on that? All right, stop that. Think about, what do you struggle with? What are your temptations? Those things that other people struggle with are easy to hate. I'm asking you, God is asking you to learn how to hate what you struggle with. Stop being tempted to do it and teach yourself how to hate it. Learn to hate as he hates. Learn to have the same feeling towards sin that God has towards sin. So just kind of getting started, I'm going to follow the same kind of, track there. But first off, we'll go back to the beginning. go back to the basic. Don't hate things for no reason. Don't hate things without a good reason. God doesn't do that. That's not, when we say God hates things, that's not arbitrary. He's not capricious in his hatred. He hates things for a proper reason, which is really, we're going to kind of end the lesson with thinking about that. But let's not hate something for no reason. Specifically, and this is forefront in my mind because I guess it was 2 Sundays ago, we had the lesson about the fact that we are to be our brother's keeper. We're supposed to be invested in each other's well-being, care, and concern for them. And one of the main points in that was from these verses in 1 John 2, 1 John 3, where God has shown us love, and he's asking us to show one another love. And one of the most important things we can do for one another in showing love is to correct one another, to reach out and help one another when we're struggling with sin and challenges and difficulties. And if we don't do that, if we see our brother in need, and we don't help them, he describes that as closing your heart to him. You've closed your heart to them. And he asks the question, if you do that, how does the love of God abide in you? How does the love of God abide? And twice there in chapter 3, I meant to note the verses, but twice in chapter 2, verse 9 and verse 11, he refers to the fact that if we don't love as God loves, then we are hating our brother. He uses that word twice in the span of 3 verses. If you don't love your brother, you hate them. And if you remember this, go to chapter 3 and read. He's saying, if you hate your brother, meaning you don't love him as you should, if you hate your brother, you're like a murderer. He not only says, okay, you don't love as you should, you're actually hating, that's a problem. And if you're hating, you're comparable to a murderer. It's like a murder. because you're not doing for them what they need, what they desperately need us to do. This is such a powerful context because it's connecting these ideas, again, the love of God, the love that we see in God as compared to the hate that he has for people when they go against him, for the sin when they go against him. And then here, the instruction for us to love our brother. I meant to point out too, and I don't want to over-apply this, but I do want to say it. So sometimes you'll hear the idea presented as like, well, we need to hate the sin but love the sinner. Hate the sin, love the sinner. Now, I think there's a very real sense that that's true, and I'm not trying to undo that. But when you read that list from Proverbs, it says he hates the feet that run to shed innocent blood. He hates the one who sows discord among brethren. And it just made me think about it in a very powerful way. God does not hate sinners, but he hates it when they sin. And that, to me, for some reason, it just struck me differently. Is when people are sinning, when they are going against God, it is a hateful thing. And he wants to love them. He wants to, but he can't if they're in sin. He cannot. And so that's the way I think we need to think about it. We do not hate our brothers. We're ready to offer help and love to them at every chance that we can. But we do hate the sin, and we hate what sin does to someone, which is certainly, I think, where some of the latter points are going to touch on. It also a lesson from a couple weeks ago. You remember the story of Ahab when we studied Ahab. When the true prophet came to Ahab, Micaiah comes to Ahab, remember the exchange between Ahab and Jehoshaphat. He says, I don't even want to call for that guy because he never prophesies good concerning me. He never prophesies good. And Ahab twice, he says, I hate him. I hate that guy because he never prophesies good concerning me. That's a powerful example of hating for the wrong reasons. He hated this man because he was speaking the truth to him. That's the kind of hate we should not have. We need to look for that kind of hate, an unhealthy hate, a hate that is not connected to sin, and try to root that out of our lives. There is clearly some passages where we see this second use of the word hate, and I want to spend just a moment on that. In Matthew 6 and verse 24, Jesus tells us there, you cannot serve two masters. And the reason you can't serve two masters is you're either going to love one and hate the other, or you're going to cling to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. You've got to pick. You have to have a preference. And the word hate is used. And what we need to understand from that is we're either, by virtue of the fact that we're either serving God or we're serving Satan. We're either serving God or we're serving the world. We're either loving God or we're loving the world. That's the reality of that choice. And so we have to prefer the right thing. We have to prefer the correct thing, the most important thing. And when you see that choice, God is basically telling us you're either going to hate the world or you're going to hate me. If you don't hate the world, then you hate me. And that's what he's trying to get us to overcome. He also tells us, and of course, Matthew 10 reads in a way that's more palatable to us. You have to love Jesus, love God more than father, mother, son, or daughter. We understand that idea. I need to love them more. But when you read it in Luke's account, and I'd ask you to turn there in Luke 14, you read it in Luke's account, the language is much stronger and it uses the word hate. Luke 14, picking up about verse 25. 25, 26. Now great crowds accompanied him, and he turned and he said to them, Luke 14, 26, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, and even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. You have to hate these earthly connections. You have to hate these earthly relationships in order to be his disciple. And I think we understand that this is the second usage of that word. He's not asking you to despise your father and mother. That would go against other passages. He's not asking you to despise these other relationships. He's asking you to make sure you're putting God first. Make sure God is more important to you, that He is the one you have preference over. And as you read on, he says at the end of that verse, he has to even hate his own life. If you do not hate your own life, so we can put that up there as well. We have to hate our own lives. But again, it's this idea of preferring. We're serving the Lord. We care more about serving the Lord than we do about our own life. So we have preference over that. This is really powerful, and I wanted to connect it with John 12. I think Luke 14 is one that was kind of familiar to me, but I'd never really connected it with John 12. You would read over there with me. John 12, verse 24 and 25. This is where Jesus is really prophesying about his own death, and he describes the fact that a grain of wheat, a seed, has to die. If it doesn't die, it can't bear fruit. That's verse 24. And then verse 25, he says, whoever loves his life loses it. Whoever loves his life loses it. Whoever hates his life in this world will keep it for eternal life. So this is what he's asking us to hate our life. And you're like, well, wait a minute. I kind of enjoy life. Like, in what way am I supposed to hate it? We'll go on and read. He says, if anyone serves me, he must follow me. For where I am, there will my servant be also. If anyone serves me, the Father will honor him. What he's asking is to prefer him, prefer service of him, prefer being his disciple to doing your own thing, to being your own person. You have to love him more. And when you connect Luke 14 and John 12, it's very powerful that we in a sense, we need to hate everything else in view of how much we love God, in view of how much we want to serve God. All right, so obviously with the last bit of our time, I want to get into what we're supposed to hate. We are supposed to hate as God hates, not hating things for no reason, but we are supposed to hate sin. We are supposed to hate false teaching. Hebrews 1 and verse 9 describes, talking about Jesus, talking about the Son of God, that he loved righteousness and hated wickedness. Loved righteousness and hated wickedness. We're going to see that ideal applied to us as well. But that in essence is who God is. God, we've already said, he loves righteousness. He hates wickedness. Jesus described that way, and it obviously you think about the fact that Jesus says he and the Father are one. They stood unified, and part of this way that they were unified was in this. They loved the same things, and they hated the same things. If we want to be unified with them as Jesus prayed that all of us would be one with him, we need to learn to love what he loves and hate what he hates. We've got to educate ourselves and change our mindset. As I said, not just hating the sins that we have no problem with, but hating the sins that we struggle with as well. I want you to go to Amos with me. If you would turn over to the book of Amos. I just want to spend a little bit of time here. In chapter 6, you see one of these passages that you could point to and say, all right, this is really would be good. Back when we were talking about Proverbs 6 and the things that the Lord hates, that you see that in chapter 6. So look with me for a second. He says in verse 1, woe to those who are at ease at Zion. He goes on to talk about that. Verse 4, woe to those who lie on beds of ivory. Verse 5, who sing idle songs. He's talking about woe to those who are in comfort, woe to those who have everything going their way, because they're not looking to the Lord. They're not looking to him. And he says in verse 7, they're going to go into exile. All of this revelry, all their parties are going to pass away. Verse 8 says, why? The Lord has sworn by himself, declares the Lord, God of hosts, I abhor the pride of Jacob, and I hate his strongholds. He abhors the pride of Jacob, and he hates his strongholds. I'm going to come back to this verse at some point in the future and build a lesson upon this idea of that God hates our strongholds. I just want to plant that seed in your mind. God hates your strongholds. He hates my strongholds. What does that mean? A stronghold is something in your life that you count on instead of God. You have a stronghold in your life, whether it be your talent, your ability, your bank account, your connections. You have strongholds in your life that you lean on instead of leaning on God. And God hates those things. He hates the things that keep us separate from Him. He hates them. Isn't that powerful? We need to think some more about that. So now go back to chapter 5. In chapter 5, we're told in verse 4, seek me. This is God saying, seek me and live. If you would just seek me, you would live. He says it again in verse 6, seek the Lord and live. Does that sound like anything that we know in the New Testament? Absolutely. If you seek Him, you will find Him. Seek me and live. Seek me and live. So what does that look like? Down in verse 14, seek good, not evil, that you may live. See, part of seeking God, which everybody like, I was seeking God, I choose Jesus. Jesus, you're the Lord of my life. Everybody gets that far. But then part of seeking God is seeking good and not seeking evil. You see, if you're going to seek God, you're going to try to come into fellowship with Him, you have to love what He loves and you have to hate what He hates. Seek good and not evil. So now, very specifically, verse 15, hate evil and love good. Establish justice in the gate. If you take one verse with you today, I would ask you to take that verse, Amos 5 and verse 15. Hate evil and love good. That's, in essence, that's what this lesson is all about. Learn, educate yourself to hate evil, the same evil that God hates. Not what you think is evil, but what God has said is evil. Love good, hate evil. It's so powerful. But you see it in this chapter connected to the ideal of seeking God. If you're seeking God, you will learn to hate what He hates and love what He loves. I want you to turn to these Psalms too. This is the heart of the lesson. Psalm 97, connecting Amos 5 and then Psalm 97. Simple truth, simple passages that we can take with us. Psalm 97 and verse 10. He says, "O you who love the Lord," all you people out there, you claim you love the Lord, "O you who love the Lord, hate evil. He preserves the lives of His saints. He delivers them out of the hand of the wicked. If you love the Lord, hate evil." That's what we got to do. We got to learn how to hate what He hates. Hate the evil that He hates. Another powerful psalm, Psalm 119. If you know anything about Psalm 119, it is a beautiful passage. It's basically a love song to the law of God. God's law is a law of good. It shows us the right way to live, good way to live. And in that, Psalm 119, verse 104, he says, "Through your precepts I get understanding, therefore I hate every false way." That would be a great passage to memorize. Through your precepts I get understanding. My eyes are opened, and therefore, because of that, I hate every false way. That's what we've got to do. We've got to learn His precepts so that we can hate what needs to be hated. That's really the meat of the sermon. I want Amos 5, Psalm 97, Psalm 119, I want those verses to really resonate. But I do want to just take a second as we finish the lesson to think about, well, why should we hate sin? If we've already said God hates it, God hates these things, He's asking us to hate the same things that He hates. Why? Why should I hate these things? And why should anybody? And people in the world, they have an idea, and sometimes we clearly get pulled into this, but there's an idea that the labeling of sin is the hateful thing. You label something as sin, well, you're keeping me from doing what I want to do, and that's hateful. You're being hateful for keeping me from doing what I want to do. But when you understand what sin is, when you understand what sin does, you'll start to be able to hate it as God hates it. So just a few basic points. We're not going to turn to these, but these are passages very easy to understand, and we could add others to that. But sin, remember in David's Psalm 51, he says, "Against you and against you only I have sinned." Sin is against God. And we make the point, that was his sin with Bathsheba that he's talking about. He sinned against Bathsheba. He sinned against Uriah. He sinned against lots of people that he lied to. He sinned against the whole nation because of some of the consequences, his family. He sinned against a lot of people. But in the end, what mattered the most was that he had sinned against God. And sometimes we can convince ourselves, hey, my sin's not hurting anybody else. My sin's not hurting anybody. What difference is it to you? Let me live my life. if I love you and I know you're in sin, and I know your sin is against God, I'm not really loving you if I don't tell you that, if I don't communicate that. And going along with that is realizing that sin separates us from God. If I know you're in sin, or you know I'm in sin, then you know, if I'm in sin, you know I'm separated from God. I have no relationship with Him. I'm not one with Him. I can't be with Him in eternity. I'm going to be separated from Him for eternity. And you're not going to tell me that. You're not going to point that out. You're not going to help me to see the error of my ways. We should hate sin because, yes, it's against God. It's hateful to Him, as we've already said, but it also destroys the relationship. It destroys the relationship between man and God. You read John 1, 1 John chapter 1, you say you have fellowship with the Lord, but if you walk in darkness, you're lying. And people out there in the world, they're claiming that they have a relationship. They're claiming they're in fellowship with the Lord, but they're walking in sin. And John says there in 1 John chapter 1, they're lying. You're lying if you do that. There's a whole lesson, I think, that needs to be preached on how sin is degrading. Sin is degrading. God hasn't just arbitrarily asked us not to do certain things. He's asked us to do things that are evil because they degrade us. It's just the kind of life that sinners lead, the kinds of life that sin leads us into is a sad, degraded existence. It's less than the life that we could have if we would just live God's way. If people could just look to Him and look to His wisdom. And again, read Psalm 119 and think about all the different ways that the Word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. It keeps us from all these evils and helps us toward all these good ends. But sin is degrading. Sin destroys. Sin keeps people from having true life. Remember, Jesus, He says, I came to give life and give it abundantly. He's not just talking about eternal life. He's talking about true, wonderful life here on earth. And sin destroys that. Sin just degrades who we are as people made in God's image. It degrades that and destroys that. Obviously, we know the sin will cause people to be lost. We should hate sin because it will cause people to be lost. And I should hate it when people are engaged in sin. I'm not hating the sinner, but I hate it when they're engaged in the sin because I know if they don't change, they're going to be lost. And we need to learn to speak about it in those kinds of terms as Jesus did. Romans 6 so clearly describes the wages of sin is death. If I know somebody is walking in that path and I say nothing, I do nothing, how does the love of God abide in me? We have to learn how to stand up and hate the sin that is destroying people's lives around us, to hate the sin that's keeping people from the Lord. I appreciate your attention so much. I hope that this has been profitable. Again, if you're taking verses with you, take Amos 5, Psalm 97, Psalm 119. Take those verses with you. Store those verses in your heart. They'll help us. They'll help us to have the kind of conversations that we need to have with people. As we prepare to conclude the service, we'll be ending with an invitation song. If you know for whatever reason that your life is not right with the Lord, if you know that you have sin that's not been addressed, then you have an opportunity. God's given us an opportunity to be here, to hear this lesson, to think and reflect on our situation. If you need to come forward for whatever reason, please do so as we stand and sing. When the trumpet of the Lord shall sound